Okay, once again, welcome everyone here. Let's see. Okay, thanks, Angelica. Thanks for letting us know about Sabrina. Welcome back, everyone. Last week we talked about behavior and signs of behavioral, that behavior is communication and that what de-escalation is. This week we're going to go on the next part and we're going to talk about self-awareness, different severity, escalation levels, the de-escalation staircase, that's the visual I like to use, and just some incident minimization and de-escalation strategies. So let's get started. So once again, if there's any questions or you'd like to share an experience, any changes, put it in the chat or let me know. Okay, self-awareness and de-escalation. One of our goals with de-escalation is incident minimization. It is important we understand in what ways we could be inadvertently escalating others. Being self-aware is an important part of de-escalation, especially working with persons with substance use disorder. So what does it mean to be self-aware?
Was that like a question for us?
Yes, if you'd like to answer to the everywhere.
I think it's just having a deep understanding of your own emotional reality and your past experience and trauma and kind of what has shaped your frame of reference and to know that frame of reference.
Absolutely. Thank you. We do. We need to be self-aware. We need to learn how we respond in stressful situations to be able to de-escalate others. Our personal reactions and responses during a crisis affects if the other person can de-escalate or escalate further. So absolutely, we need to be self-aware, and being aware of our own thoughts, emotions, and actions will help us with that. So let's start with internal. So our internal thoughts and actions. So cognitively, what are our thoughts? What are our beliefs, biases, assumptions, values, and mental focus? If we are using stigmatized language, stuff like that, stuff we talked about last week. A lot of this, we need to be aware of what our own things. Emotional, what are our current emotion and feelings? Trauma response, or do we have some sort of trauma response to escalation or what is happening or to the people around us? Our stress level and mood all affect and being self-aware of those things. And it's hard when we're in busy environments that are requiring a lot of us, cognitively, physically, everything all at once. So it's really important to try to stay connected with ourselves and what is happening with ourselves. Externally, behavior, we talked about this last week, verbal and nonverbal communication. De-escalation is a communication technique. That's the big part of de-escalation. So what we are communicating verbally and nonverbally is very important to be aware of, and be aware of how our body is responding. Are we having rapid breathing? Are we unknowingly, because of everything going in our mind, doing some sighs or deep breathing, all of those things? If someone's entering already escalated, we could be increasing their escalation inadvertently. So, okay. So our main goal with this, we're running incident minimization. We are wanting to de-escalate. So we want to respond and not react. So being self-aware and learning self-awareness is going to help us be able to respond and not react. So let's talk about being self-aware with communication. To make sure we are developing self-aware de-escalation habits that will encourage incident minimization, there are a few strategies we can implement internally and externally. So let's talk about that. One of our goals is to build trust and rapport. Being able to de-escalate someone can be someone that you interact with often, building a relationship, building trust and rapport between them when you're having to de-escalate is very important, because that means that the de-escalation will be more effective as time goes on. So let's talk about that. One of the ways to do that is interacting in a positive way with respect and dignity. When we tell people respect is earned, there it isn't clear direction or instructions. So when do you earn it? When do people earn respect? When you're telling people, well, it's got to be earned, and that's something we've heard. I was raised with that. It's hard to change that mindset. Everyone is deserving of respect. I'm not saying trust and respect are one and the same, but everyone is deserving to be treated respectfully, especially in de-escalation, being self-aware. It is important that we remember that and do that, because we are not necessarily getting respect back. So we need to make sure that we're keeping that and remembering that respect is a baseline and not earned. Keep our instructions simple, concise, and clear. If we are interacting with a person that could be escalating or already escalated, we need to make sure our instructions are simple, clear, and concise. We reduce the chance of escalation happening through miscommunication, misunderstandings, or confusion. And that's really important when we're working with de-escalation. Be careful with humor. I struggle with this. I speak fluent sarcasm. I'm sure most of you understand that. It is hard. I enjoy um, developing relationships with humor. I enjoy jokes. I enjoy joking around and smiling and feeling happy. And one of the ways I reduce stress or try to lighten the situation will be, oh, let's throw some humor in there. So being self-aware about that is really important, especially when you're dealing with people with certain diagnoses, autism, something like that, don't understand certain kinds of humors or misread social cues. It can cause an escalation, or it can already escalate someone, increase escalation in someone. So just be careful with your humor, especially if you don't know that person very well or know their humor. Um, Actively listening, understanding what people are saying or not saying, instead of going right to solutions. Sometimes we listen to solve or um, listen to go right on to the next thing, or listen to respond. We need to make sure that when being part of it is being self-aware and making sure how we listen is understanding what people are saying or not saying, instead of going right to the solutions or moving on. We need to really making sure we're listening to them. And validate, let people know they are heard or being listened to, that their feelings matter and that you heard them. Don't argue. They're telling you what they're wanting. That is not the time to be telling them, especially if they're a potential to escalate or potential to escalate further. Now is not the time to argue with them. Pause and give extra time if needed. Don't rush. If you're listening to them and you're talking to them and they seem to be struggling a little bit, if you're rushing them or trying to fill the time or something, it's okay to pause and give a little extra time and be patient with them. Use respectful language, avoiding stigmatized terms. We put a really awesome, um, I'll have to see if I can put it at the end again, form from the website. I'll have to pull it up, but that talks about what are stigmatized terms and what to use instead and why. It's a really great resource. I will make sure to post it at the end for those that weren't here last week to get it. And then the tone we are using is really important when we are to be self-aware about our tone, how we're speaking, how fast we're speaking or not. I'm get nervous, so I'm probably going to speed up and slow down instead of keeping a moderate, low, and positive tone during this, because I get nervous and I get ahead in my head. So it's really important when we're trying to do de-escalation, that we're focusing on making sure our tone we're using is moderate, low, positive, or getting neutral, and we really moderate it as if there's a potential for escalating. So does anyone have any comments they want to say at this point? I do want to put the question out there. When you're talking with someone with a person with substance use disorder, really important. Using respectful language is really important um, in avoiding escalation with them. So making sure that we are really listening to them. They're already probably feeling super vulnerable and have a level of escalation that maybe we can't see. So making sure that we are um, really paying attention. I was gonna check the chat. I was gonna make sure I check the chat a lot today. Did anyone want to add any comments?
I found the first point here really useful.
Yeah, the respect
It,
is a baseline.
that just turns, I mean, what our culture, or at least most people, like on its head, what they normally say, right? It's not given till you earn it from me. But
Absolutely.
yeah, the point is like, how do they know when they've earned it? How do they
Absolutely.
earn it?
Yeah, saying, oh, it's not earned. There's no direct, like we're talking about, be simple, concise, and clear. How does that tell me how I can earn it, when I can earn it, and
Yeah,
how I will be treated when I earn it?
what do I get,
So
a gold
yeah.
star? Like I get 10 gold
Yeah.
stars, I get a stamp.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that
Right.
was really, that's a good takeaway.
Thank you, Cody. Yes, it is. That is one things we teach when we teach de-escalation. I probably should have given a little promo thing. I've been teaching de-escalation for years. I'm a trained de-escalator for the Iron County School District. I teach de-escalation all the way up through physical management. We're not discussing that through in this. It's just going to be the communication part. But yes, that's usually a big one. Respect is baseline. And then my last one, which I always, and I said last week, you guys are going to keep hearing me say this through the whole series. Typically, the escalation happening isn't about you. So if you start reacting, escalating to what is happening, it will make it harder to be successful at de-escalation. When you aren't responding the way they want, they're going to keep trying to escalate and make it personal, especially persons with substance use disorder. It's hard when you're being spoken to or treated disrespectfully to remember to stay respectful and to make it not about ourselves. So remember, our goal is incident minimization and de-escalation. Staying focused on our goals of safety, incident minimization and de-escalation is really important. So we making sure that self-awareness of how you are feeling isn't contributing to the escalation. So I have my little quit taking it personally Q-tip. So sometimes I'll say Q-tip, you can't take it personally. You quit taking it personally. Typically the escalation, which we talked about last week, is not about you. It is about the person, and they are trying to communicate something to us. All behavior is communication. They are trying to communicate what's a need or a want, or it is a habit, a behavior that they have learned that gets the response they want. So they are going to do whatever it takes to do that. And it is not about you. So Q-tip, go taking it personally. I'm going to be saying it still a lot through it. Okay, let's talk about physically self-aware. Um, this is another one I struggle with. That's why I probably put it first. A little part of me in this is keep facial expressions as neutral as possible. I have to really work at that. A lot of times I respond a lot first physically or with my face. So making sure we're keeping facial expressions as neutral as possible during de-escalation is really important, especially those with substance use disorder. They're going to be really paying attention to how you're reacting. They're going to be really paying attention to what you're saying or doing or behaving or what they can read into it. So you need to be careful with that. The way you are breathing, like I spoke earlier, if you're sighing, sometimes I just take a deep breath and um, someone next to me would be like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you stressed?" I was like, "Oh, no, I'd been sitting all hunched over and just needed to take a deep breath." Sometimes I've thinking about all the million things I've got to go home and do. There's a lot of times I have busy kids. I coached soccer for a long time. I just was in my head. And so I just, sigh. And, that can be misread. So making sure that we are staying focused and present and paying attention to our breathing, our facial, and our body, what we're communicating nonverbally. Be careful of body positioning. We want to make sure that we are not sending a nonverbal message of like crossed legs, crossed arms. When someone is escalating, they're going to be really paying attention to our nonverbal cues. So we need to be in our nonverbal communication. So we really need to make sure that we are um, positioning our body, standing, our stance, the way we are standing, leaning against something. We can look like we're not even paying attention. It's a safety issue, which we'll talk about a little bit later too. If we move in a way that blocks us from the exit or puts us in a vulnerable position towards the person that could be escalating, that's dangerous too. We need to make sure we're keeping movements even and calmly paced and avoid sudden movements. This is part of being self-aware and part of de-escalation and behaving in a way, changing our habits, our daily habits, so that we don't inadvertently escalate. If we're moving around, it's hard. Like I'm a fast mover and I think fast and I move fast and I get things done fast. And I've got this list in my head and I love to check off my list because it's helping me feel successful. And I'm trying to work as fast, especially when we're in like routine. I'm working as fast as I can, as hard as I can. I think I'm doing awesome, not realizing I am completely stressing everyone else out around me. They are not privy to what is going on in my head. They are not privy to my little list checking off that I'm feeling successful and great. And so we need to be careful with that. When you are in routine, we are often in routine. We come in, we are seeing a patient, we come in, or they come in and it's just routine for us. It could be their first time. It could be they're already escalated from another situation. So anything that's happening and happening fast for them is just going to keep escalating them. We need to make sure that we're not just caught up in the routine. So communicating, using our communication and having our movements match our communication, not being just sudden movements and just trying to keep a nice even pace will help. Communicate everything you're doing, like I was just saying, especially if it's routine for you. That's just one thing. I noticed there are some people that do really well at this. I noticed it was, I think last time I was with a child at the eye doctor, they were moving and they were moving around the room, but they were communicating everything they were doing to us. And it was high stress for my son because he has some eye issues. And so it was really good for them to be saying, I'm just getting this. This is what I need for this. This is how I'm doing this. That really helped keep the situation calm for us. Just double check in the chat. Anyone have any comments before we move on? Okay. Recognize your limits, take breaks, tap out if needed or can. I like this reminder in here. I need this reminder often. You're going to see it often throughout this training. It's because I need to be reminded it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to recognize my limits. It's okay to say I need a break. It's okay to tell another staff member, you know what? I just can't do this. There have been times I've jumped from de-escalation to de-escalation to de-escalation and done some groups. And then we get to a student has de-escalated and I can't do it. And it's okay to be like, I need to do something for myself. That's part of self-awareness, realizing that maybe I can't do this or I need to break a second before I can handle things. So, and that's okay. Being part of self-awareness, that's all part of self-awareness and de-escalation. Okay, so the next part we're going to talk about is being emotionally self-aware. My slides are wanting to freeze for a moment. All right, we're having some technical difficulties at the moment. Let me see what I need to do. Hey, just wasn't wanting to work. Okay, it's going to be all up all at once. Okay, being emotionally self-aware, recognizing the emotions you are feeling is very important as part of self-awareness so that we can stay present and focused and recognizing our emotions Sometimes something's going to trigger us that we don't even realize, and we don't want to inadvertently escalate someone else because of what is going on with us. Recognizing what physical reactions are linked to our emotions are very important because we don't want to inadvertently send a nonverbal communication to someone that can escalate or increase in escalations. If we're in the middle of a de-escalation, last thing we want to be doing is what's happening and how they're escalating is triggering in us, and we're doing a back and forth here. We're escalating, they're escalating, we're escalating, they're escalating. That's not going to be helpful. So um, you should be using some personal self-regulation strategies and skills to be able to stay regulated. Are there some certain strategies you want to share that work for you? I just listed a few that we teach to help people self-regulate, learn regulation, learn their emotions. Teaching K through 12 and up and even into college, there's any time in there they need to learn. You need to learn you need to learn your emotions and regulations. A lot of times, persons with substance use disorder, that's what they're trying to get away from is their feelings. And so, if we can be aware with ours and know what ours is, and we can also teach that to others, and that'll be part of at the end of de-escalation teaching. But meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, fidgets, stress balls, any of the little things, something sensory that can help. We also need to make sure we're building our resilience to be prepared when we're dealing with situations that can wear us down, don't allow us to take a lot of breaks, sometimes mess with our nutrition, our rest, all of those things. We make sure we're taking the time to meet our basic needs and do self-care, getting good nutrition when we can, adequate rest, taking breaks when needed, exercise if that's your jam, and just what you need to do to decompress. Is there anyone who would like to share any self-regulation strategies and skills that work for you or things you do to decompress? So just to make sure we're not wearing ourselves down to the point that we're not able to help others when we can't even help ourselves. So this is all part of self-awareness.
I'm a I'm a big believer in Qigong. I've done that for several years. That's been really helpful and transformative.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. That is, yes, finding your things that help you and help you build your resilience so that you're able to help others. That's very important with de-escalation. You need to be taking care of yourself to be able to help others. So, okay, we're humming right along. Let's talk about a safe environment. We've been talking about our goals of creating safety through incident minimization and prevention with understanding behavior, understanding self-awareness. The other part is through your environment. It is not possible for your setting to be completely free of anything dangerous, but we need to try and achieve a balance between safety and needed access to things. So I want you guys to kind of look around in your environments and see what you have in your environments that could be dangerous as we're talking about this. So to be part of self-awareness with your environment is regularly safety check your environment, remove secure items that are unsafe. And we'll talk about what those are in a moment. Limit access to items and tools that could potentially be used to harm. So I'm talking about like self-awareness is talking about being prepared to be able to de-escalate and to do incident minimization prevention to try to not escalate others. So these are things we should be doing on the regular. What are things you're doing to limit access to items and tools that could potentially used to be harmed? I mean, literally anything could be used to. Um, a piece of paper break something. I'm like, I've seen everything possible that could be used to try to harm or create some sort of escalation. So make sure you're positioning furniture to be able to move away in the event of an escalation. So you need to be able to move around. Like furniture shouldn't be locking people into anywhere. You should also be able to move the furniture away in an escalation, or if it's not possible to move, it should be able to be secured somehow to not be able to be used. Um, Things such as like bookshelves, cupboards, furniture like that, you need to be having some sort of plan or some way you have it secured for those times when there's escalation that could, we don't know how it could escalate. We want to try and de-escalate. We want to prevent, we want to do it, but escalation is surprising us all. Be aware of what items that are present in your environment so that you can quickly remove them when needed. part of regularly safety checking your environment is making you aware of what's there and what's not there. So that you can know. So let's talk about what could be used as dangerous objects. Um, anything, anything, depending on when they're coming into an intake desk or an office or anywhere. What are things you just have right around you? Clipboards, staplers, scissors, pictures, chairs, push pins, staples. Literally anything can be used. So trying to minimize that when anything that can be used as a dangerous object is good just on the regular. Substances, what are substances that can be used? A favorite right now, because everybody has it, especially after COVID, is hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is often used in escalation as a dangerous substance. Drinks, hot drinks, cold drinks, highly allergenic foods. If you're having peanuts or something like that, you don't know who's allergic, who's not. Nuts, things like that, that have a high amount of people allergic to. Another way of safe environment is you need to, we're going to talk about safety plans next week, but you need to have a plan for if you need to be able to remove other vulnerable individuals to make a environment safer for them and for others. Literally anything can be used as a weapon. So we need to limit what is accessible as much as possible and still be able to do our jobs efficiently. So okay, let's talk about some personal safety habits. The habits we follow while working and in our everyday are important. There are basic habits we should use for when we are near individuals with the potential for dangerous behaviors to keep us safer. So staying alert, I've talked about that just a moment ago, scanning your environment. You come into a new place, scan your environment. That should be becoming habits. These are habits we need to be developing as part of de-escalation and self-awareness to be able to be successful. We need to practice. You can't expect to be, okay, I saw this presentation, I know all the things, and I'll just be able to do it when it comes up. In a high stress situation, you're going to do what you practice. So practicing these things daily will help you be able to do it in the high stress moments. In the moments of de-escalation when you need them, we need to recall that information. The habits we follow are very important. So stay alert, scan the area frequently, minimize your distractions. How often do you see that nowadays? Someone walking around with their phone, they walk into things, they walk over things, they are totally, I saw a girl the other day, I think it was on TikTok. She was walking across the train track and didn't notice the train that was slowing down, and it ended up like clipping her a little and she was okay, but didn't even notice a big, huge train coming towards her. So especially when we're around those that could have the potential to de-escalate or to escalate, we need to make sure that we have our distractions at a minimum to create a personal safety habit. Assume aggression or escalation as a possibility. So using incentivization and prevention strategies, learning all these habits. We don't want aggression to happen. Our whole point is incident minimization and prevention. We don't want aggression to happen. So we're wanting to do all of these things to not create it, but it is a possibility. So make sure we're developing these habits and using them so that we don't get it, but know that it's a possibility. Know where your exits are in every room you enter and make sure they aren't blocked. It's another thing of scanning the room, knowing where your exits are. Use safe positioning. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. Don't turn your back. Don't be right in front. That can be taken really confrontationally and could escalate someone. Try to stay on a diagonal with your body turned towards at as much as possible. If you're practicing this, it's just become a way of habit, especially when you're de-escalating something and suddenly you start changing how you're positioning yourself towards them. Suddenly you're changing how you're sitting. Suddenly you're changing how you're talking. That's why we want to develop these. So it's not out of the usual. We are doing these regularly. We've developed these habits. It's not out of the usual. So that can't be used as for someone to be to escalating. It helps with our incident minimization and prevention. Maintain comfortable balanced positions that allow you to move. Like we said, assume aggression, escalation. You need to be developing these personal habits to be prepared, be able to move, be able to maintain your personal safety. That is one of our main goals is safety, safety for you, safety for the escalated person, and safety for anyone else. Try to stay eye level. We don't want to be towering over somebody or, like having that exchange of power, like you're over them or they're over you because you're down. Sit, squat if needed. Just don't get caught if sitting or don't get caught in a position like you're stuck. We always want to say, pay attention to what chairs you're sitting in or what you're sitting on. Just don't get caught. Um, you need to be moving and keeping yourself safe in a position that you can be ready for anything. Always use your closest hand. Sometimes we don't think about that. I'm right-handed. The person is on my left. Oh, I'm going to try and use with my right hand. I have now compromised my safety and I am um, turning my body in a funny way that could potentially, especially if I'm working with an escalated person, I could get harmed. So we want to make sure that we're doing things that keep us safe. So always use your closest hand until you can move and then make whatever dominant hand you want to your closest hand. Don't approach or touch the person unexpectedly. We talked about that being one of the signals or triggers for um, people, especially persons with SUD. You cannot just approach or touch them unexpectedly without communication or expectation or letting them know what is happening. Um, we don't want to startle. We don't want to escalate in any way, cause a influx of emotion or adrenaline. So we need to be careful with that. Pay close into body language, tone of voice, and other signals of potential agitation. Pay attention here. We're talking about self-awareness. We're talking about doing that. We're talking about pay attention that to everyone, not just yourself. Pay close attention to your other staff. Um, there was a time I was getting more and more agitated, and I got tapped on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, um, I'm here to help." And I realized, they were recognizing signs of me escalating that I wasn't paying attention to, and I needed to tap out. I needed to get switched out. So it was a way of helping me and supporting me. And we need to be able to do that for others. Okay, we're going to switch subjects for a little bit. Does anyone have any comments or want to just check in our chat, making sure? Looks like we're good.
So we've had some discussion here about like how we alert our staff to potentially like hazardous or escalated situations.
Hmm.
So for a while we had like a little remote panic button. You could push it and it would sound
Perfect.
an alarm, but it makes this god awful noise, right? And
Hmm. Which could
there's people
escalate.
in the camp of like this is like making it worse, right? Because now the person knows that panic, or that's potentially a call to law enforcement, which may or may not be.
Yep.
And there's other people that are like, hey, I don't feel safe without this because if I need to summon help,
Especially if you're in there alone, you need something. Is that part of, do you guys have a safety plan in place? That's something we're going to be talking about next week, developing safety plans and, especially to your needs that are needed and
that's
figuring
kind
what out
of
that's
just
going
common usage, like someone
to.
decided that was right. But
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know what other places do, or if anyone else has any input on that. It's a matter of lively debate in our office.
Sometimes people I know, like especially we have issues with that in the schools and stuff like that. You don't want to alarm an entire classroom. You don't want to cause trauma because then you have a whole nother set of problems on your hands. So when we're needing something like that, we've had code words that we've developed that are usual everyday words people use, that if it is used, sometimes we've had radios that you can push a silent button, but it's not silent to other people that are wearing the radio or wearing the whatever device. People have used phones, but I mean, if your hands are full, it's hard. It's hard to know what's going to work perfect and what's great. I think just trying things until you find something that works most of the time, because none of this stuff is 100% or foolproof. It's just finding what works. And maybe you're going to have different things for different people. So that's part of like the debriefing and recovery to set, figuring out we have certain people that have, certain escalations, certain triggers, certain things, and we need to make sure that we're being aware and creating plans for that. So yeah,
Yeah, I feel like the alarm itself is very
alarming.
escalating. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, because now that person knows like, oh, well, now this is now it's a situation.
Right.
Like
And
you have like betrayed me, like
mm-hmm.
now you're getting the cops, or now you're,
And especially when you're
everyone's gonna
trying
come
to,
running.
especially when you're trying to facilitate trust and rapport and a
Yes,
relationship.
you turned on the alarm on me, right? Like that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
That totally makes sense to not do that.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about a little bit more in there. So let's talk about different severities of levels of escalation and what we should do in those different levels. Um, went right into it. So we want to be able to assess the escalation level to intervene as quickly as possible. That's part of incident minimization. That's part of de-escalation, is being able to intervene as soon as possible to be able to keep the escalation as low as possible and to get the person de-escalated as quickly as possible. So we want to decrease the severity level. We want to increase successful de-escalation. Um, so the first one would be, of course, is calm. Are calm. That's where we all want to be. We wanted this homeostasis of calm. That would be great, but it's not. And we don't know what's happened before they've gotten there, what trigger signals they have. When they get there, it could be a certain person. It could, we don't know unless you know that person what has triggered our signals. So the first sign we're going to say we go from calm, we see some agitation. Some signals or triggers have happened. They're showing us signs. Maybe they're starting to change their behavior, their baseline behavior. They're starting to change baseline in communication. They're shutting down, disassociating, something. They're letting you know somehow um, it's going to be on the slight side. So if we're not paying attention, which this is part of de-escalation, is being aware of what those are. And we talked a lot about that last week. So agitation signatures, it could be physical, could be vocal, or absence of. Suddenly they stop talking. So just making sure that that's kind of our lower, but we could, if we intervened here, we could avoid and prevent. And that's one of our goals. The next would be you become a little more disruptive. So like looking at time, we're still doing good. Okay. So the next level will be a little more disruptive. So these trigger signals have already happened. Their behavior starts to interfere with others, communication or care. So what is this going to look like in your situations? What does disruptive? So we have, agitation, signs, signals. We've talked about a little bit that, like physical reactions, changes in breathing, mood, voice, language used, shutting down. They would be similar probably in persons with substance use disorder and with regular, or with everyone around. So what would be more disruptive? When is this starting to interfere? Does anyone want to put anything in the chat or comment? Okay, we'll just go ahead. What we're looking at disruptive behavior is more like pacing, swearing. I'm just throwing things out here. I'm sure you guys have seen crazier stuff than some of this. Disrobing, door slamming, repetitive questions. They're asking the same thing over and over and over. They're starting to escalate. Their voice is getting louder. Their tone is changing. They're not listening. More increased agitation. Yes, we had that level of agitation that maybe we didn't quite get to or pay attention to, and now it's getting more agitated. So in persons with a substance use disorder, would that be the same, or are there other specific things you would see from them? Want to comment?
What if there's like repetitive behaviors,
Mhm.
possibly,
Yes, thank
whatever
you.
kind?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of these behave like that's why I put it as both, like this. All of this works in any situation, anywhere. I've used it parenting, I've used it coaching, I've used it doing customer service, being part of customer service. I think all of this it's important because you have a lot. It's very similar still at this point. So the next is when you go up in the dangerous level. So this is increased agitation, more physical reactions. You're going to get dangerous. This is where you get potentially harmful. And I'm meaning potentially harmful for others. So vulnerable around yourself and the escalated person. So this is where we're going to be seeing scratching, biting, hitting. And I'm saying they could be trying to do it to others, they could be trying to do it to themselves, or they could be trying to do it to you. Scratching, biting, hitting, throwing objects. Um, you're still going to see this in persons with substance use disorder. In fact, probably even more physical things. Um, throwing objects, making threats, physical contact. Now, this is where we start crossing the line. We've been talking about up to this point that de-escalation is a communication technique. Now you're starting to get over to the point of where maybe physical management needs to enter. And whether you have physical management or you have a safety plan in place where we just remove everybody, get everything out of the way of the person. This is where you start, this is where safety plans are really important. You need to have your plan of how you respond to what levels of what escalation. Where do we start involving, more safety, because there are more levels than just this. So that would be going to very dangerous. This is where you're going to see dangerous behaviors that result in serious or lethal harm to themselves or others. This is where weapons or objects become weapons. Suicide attempts. I would love to say we don't see these. I don't know everybody's situation, but even in the schools, very young, kindergarten, first grade, we see suicide attempts, almost successful suicide attempts. As their behavior and part of their escalation. Very serious harm attempts, serious headbanging, um, throwing themselves into walls, stuff like this. Like you're going to be seeing a lot of this. Um, this is the very dangerous, potentially lethal. We do have one more week of talking about safety plans and stuff like that. And then the week after that, we have law enforcement coming and they talk about their role, their training. And this is where you would intervene, you would have them intervene. Um, and part of your safety plan of how you would do that and how they would want called. We're going to discuss all of that and have them talk about that and answer any of your questions. So make sure in 2 weeks that we have law enforcement representative here talking about all of those things. Um, so I like to conceptualize my de-escalation staircase. I feel like escalation and de-escalation typically happen in observable steps, like we were talking about. At some point, they were calm. They got agitated by something. It turned more disruptive, turned dangerous, very dangerous. I mean, we talked about the steps and the severity and de-escalating, depending on where they're at. It's going to take steps to de-escalate, to return back to that homeostasis of calm. So we start with at the top is our crisis. We go up and down stairs. This is how I like to conceptualize it. We have calm at the bottom. That's where we want to be. So I am just going to put our little severity levels on here for us to know when. On the bottom of our staircase, we're going to put like what things we can use to do to do at what level. So de-escalation strategies. We've talked about self-awareness, making our environment as safe as possible, personal safety, all of the incident management and prevention strategies. They're still escalating or they've come in already halfway up the staircase. We need to assess the level and try to implement a de-escalation strategy. So the first one, ask if you can help them. Typically, we only want to do this when they are still able to communicate and be responsive. I'm going to talk about each of the strategies and then we're going to talk about when the best time in the severity levels to use them. So ask if you can help them. This is used in the lowest levels of escalation. When not highly agitated, don't use if you think they will ask for something you cannot deliver. Be as specific as possible. Try to avoid overly general questions or yes or no questions. I'm going to say that several times in several of the strategies. We don't want to use yes or no questions if we can avoid it, unless the person is calm or close to being calm or becoming calm, because that gives them the chance to escalate. How many times do you talk, like, just think asking a toddler, do you want something? No. That's like their favorite word. Well, are you hungry? No. Do you want food? No. Like there obviously something is wrong. You're trying to figure out, but we don't want to ask a yes or no question because we don't want to give them the chance to escalate. We don't want them to be able to use that as a chance to escalate more. So we really want to always Always avoid yes or no questions. I talked about last week, choices are one of our biggest tools and skills in de-escalation. This is the same. Give options, not yes or no. Actively listen, tell them that you've heard them. Ask specific follow-up questions so they know they've been heard, validated, and listened to. Empathize and be not judgmental and not dismissive. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to us and we can just be kind of like, what? Like, that doesn't make sense. This is not the time to do that. If someone is escalating, whatever is happening to them is very real to them. We need to empathize, be non-judgmental, and not dismissive of what they are feeling and telling us and communicating to us. Address the want or needs that they have verbalized. This is the point we want them, that when we're using this technique, they should be verbalizing still at this point and communicating with us, hopefully. If they can't verbalize, provide other options and ways to communicate, gestures, pointing to pictures, objects, to a device, some other way that's not too hard to use, that they may already know how to use, so they won't continue to escalate. And then praise when they communicate. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for that. That will help in de-escalating, and that will help foster the relationship that we're trying to develop of trust and rapport. And we want them to communicate instead of escalate. So people like to hear when they've done something right, especially when they're feeling everything's wrong or escalating, or usually something is wrong or they're trying to meet a need. So when we're praising them, we change their mindset. We can change that, starts to help with the de-escalation. And it's good to practice anytime. I do that often with people because I appreciate being communicated with. I appreciate collaboration. So I try to often, reciprocally let them know that that's appreciated. That could be a habit we develop and use it as a strategy. Prompt an incompatible behavior or redirect as they're starting to escalate. We're going to want to start when they're becoming more agitated or present at the disruptive level. Request a specific alternative to the escalating behavior. Avoid saying don't or stop. And I've talked about that, saying like negative or like don't stop. Those are not clear, direct requests or anything. Like, how do I would love to stop. If they're escalating and they're like, I have all this stuff falling everything. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to do it. Like, so telling them to don't or stop is not helpful and will increase the escalation. Give 2 or 3 choices to choose between. When they're starting to escalate, you want to limit the amount, and you want to limit, the complexities. And once again, you can still, oh, that says using yes or no questions. That's supposed to say not using yes or no questions. I need to change that. But you want to give them 2 choices between not using yes or no questions. So say this or this. Do this or this. Like, let's use an example. They are pacing. So ask them, would you like to sit? Would you like to sit or get a drink? You don't want to ask in a way that they can tell you yes or no. I'm just kind of throwing that out there, but you want to give them choices. They feel empowered by choices because then they can choose what's happening, but it's still within a controlled environment. Identify a behavior that they will most likely comply with to prompt in a respectful, neutral tone with clear, concise instruction. Allow up to 10 seconds for them to process your request. Sometimes when we prompt, we tend to want to be like, okay, they're starting to escalate. I'm feeling stressed about this. I'm going to say, okay, do you want this and this, this? Oh, how about this and this and this? How about this and this? We want to give them time to process. When they are escalated, they're in fight or flight. They are not in a state of learning. They are not in a state of calm. They need time to process. So 10 seconds can feel like a long time. So practice that. Sometimes I've had to practice that because I am like dying to just answer and just move on. But yes, allowing time to people to process is something we need to do. It needs to be something they already know how to do, simple, and they can do it right now. We don't want to, we may know there's a safer place for them to go. If they don't know it, they aren't going to want to go there. They're going to escalate and be like, what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to make me go? Like, what are you trying to do? So it needs to be something they already know how to do, simple, and they can do it right now. Repeat if necessary. So give them their 10 seconds to process. If they still look like they're processing, you can repeat it again or change to a different one. Maybe something's changed in those 10, 20 seconds, whatever time you've given them. But just be careful you don't overwhelm. We don't want to be like, here's these 2 choices. Okay, you didn't answer that. So here are these two choices. Well, you didn't answer that. So here are these, you don't want to overwhelm. Make sure it's not reinforcing the escalated behavior. You want to make sure you're giving choices. They're escalating, they're throwing thumbs, they're doing other things. Here's an iPad to make you calm down. Here is chocolate. Here is like if we want them to be able to communicate what they need. We want to get them to a place where they're communicating in some way to let us know what they need instead of, just like just giving whatever to their behavior, because that will reinforce it. And then that teaches them, oh, if I behave this way, then I'll get that. Always praise any cooperation, even if it's not what you suggested. If you were like, do you want this or this? And then they go sit down. Thank you for sitting down. We always want to encourage the more desirable behavior that is allowing them to de-escalate. And if they are cooperating, they've cooperated a few times, switch strategies. We're talking about going on our de-escalation, making sure like, okay, I started at this, don't keep them there. Allow them to keep de-escalating and switching to the other strategies that allow them to keep de-escalating. So de-escalation strategies, just some tips here. Sometimes the best intervention may just to give the person some time and just monitor the situation. As they're escalating more and more and more, sometimes we just may need to give the person some time. Maybe they just need to try and self-regulate. If it's possible and they are safe, then this strategy will work. If you have attempted other strategies and escalation is increasing, or if the person is telling you to go away, they're telling you, I just need space for a minute. So give them a few moments to regulate. We call this kind of like the waiting strategy. Communicate, you will give them some time to self-regulate and let them know how much time. You don't want to engage them. If they're telling you, go away, yelling at you and just continue escalating, we want to disengage that behavior. So we don't want to argue or engage. It's just reinforcing that escalated behavior. We want to say, hey, maybe we can tell them, if you think this won't escalate them, I can see you are feeling a lot of emotions right now. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes you don't want to tell 2 or 3. I'm going to give you 3 minutes and I will come back and check on you. Communicate, you'll give them some time to self-regulate and let them know how much time. Don't argue, don't engage, just monitor at a safe distance, keep them at eye level, keep your body positioned safely and not confrontationally or, like you're ignoring them, because then they'll try to escalate the behavior to get your attention again. Stay focused. And then don't engage. This is really important in this one because this is a higher level of escalation. Make sure you're not engaging in side conversations with others. I've observed that at times when people are trying to de-escalate someone, they're giving them time and then they're like, hey, talking to their friend, hey, like, what are you doing later today? That shows them that you are not invested in helping them. They're going to start escalating again. So we're wanting them to de-escalate, making sure you're staying focused, staying engaged with the situation, and not distracting from it. If you can have them, if needed, direct them to a safer, quieter location. If they're feeling overwhelmed, you can tell it's overstimulation, something, and you can't get everybody away. You can't get everyone out of the situation for them, then try and see if you can get them to a quieter location. A lot of times they'll buy into that pretty quicker because they're wanting out of there. That's why they're escalating. Once showing signs of de-escalating, engage the prompting or helping strategies. Like we said, keep working them down that staircase. If continuing to escalate, evaluate the safety of you and others, refer to your safety plans, start removing people and unsafe objects as calmly as possible. Sometimes that can be done as very calmly because they escalate really fast, but you don't want you're removing things or removing objects to be a cause of more escalation. So when we learn more about people and develop trust and rapport, de-escalation will be more and more effective. Like I talked about last week, you can pull up any study on de-escalation. It was done by reputable and trusted. In any situation, it has shown that it works. Varying degrees, but it does show different levels of like that people, there's a decrease in severity levels, there's a decrease in the levels of interventions needed. When we're using de-escalation strategies, they do work and they will help us build trust and rapport, and it will be more and more effective. Keep it simple and de-escalate one step at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't overwhelm the person that needs the de-escalation. Keep it simple. Don't try to do too much at one time. Remember, de-escalation will take as long as it takes. Sometimes that is frustrating when we're under time constraints. But if we rush, we risk reinforcing the unwanted behavior or increasing the escalation. Be flexible and start with the strategy you think will work best. Make sure you are not being threatened or using threatening language in any way. So we don't want to increase it. We need to be really careful. We talked about self-awareness in our language. Just make sure what you're saying, like, we're running out of time. You can't, like, we've got to get this done. You've got to make sure that we're not increasing it by being threatening or using language that could be taken as threatening. And remember to be self-aware. And if needed, ask for help or switch out with another staff person, especially if they're rapport with someone else. So our de-escalation staircase again, we're going to talk about this again in safety plans, but we have our agitation. This is where help and prompt and wait really work. Agitation, disruptive, up to dangerous. A lot of the dangerous, unless they keep de-escalating into the very dangerous and harming themselves and others, then there's a lot of people have invested in physical management plans. We'll talk about those resources, and there's many things that are out there. They don't have to be restraint. They can be just safety measures for them and you. And then when law enforcement gets involved, and they'll be talking about that in 2 weeks. So let's go over. We talked about a lot today. I have a resource right here that I am going to put in the chat. This is they have on this website, they have multiple little like posters they've put together that have a lot of the things I've talked about in them that you could print off to help staff remember or help yourself remember. I just really liked the resource, looking at all the different resources. I could have made one myself, but why do it when it's already done? So I've liked these resources that they have several different ones. They talk about what to say and not say, do what to do instead. They talk about many things. I just really like. So we're going to talk about some do's and don'ts. They talk about some of this too and what to do instead. Avoid the power struggle. Part of escalation can be this power struggle. We want to avoid the arguing, like using loud, angry, or sarcastic tones with them, setting unattainable or unreasonable expectations, threats. These can all be things that will cause escalation to get out of control. So we're wanting to avoid escalation. So we want to avoid that power struggle. What we want to do instead is make sure to manage your own emotions, self-awareness, provide 2 to 3 choices. Make sure you are choosing a specific behavior to address and null at once. And Q-tip, don't take it personally. So one of the most important things we can do is always when you are de-escalating, don't try to do all the behaviors at once. We want to make sure that we are picking one behavior. Which is the most disruptive right now? The pacing, the yelling, which one are we going to pick? That's what we pick first, and that's what we address. The behavior trap, reinforcing escalating behavior just to get it to stop quickly. It will make sure it happens again. This is like a form of bribery. Use the de-escalation techniques. I know sometimes that'll be frustrating. I know sometimes it'll be like, I just don't have time for it. But in the end, it will pay off. And then don't say calm down. Saying calm down, it is not a clear direction and will increase escalation. And then avoid, be conversational, not confrontational. That's something I always like to say. A lot of times we like to get in their space and we like talking fast and like, we've got to get this done because that's something you've got to be self-aware about. Be conversational, not confrontational. Try to keep it calm, even, and helpful. Avoid shame-based redirection. We're almost out of time here. So I'm going to see what we're right at the end. Make sure we're not using verbally hurtful language, belittling comments, or even nonverbal cues that convey disapproval and disdain. We don't want to increase the escalation. So let's talk about next week. We are going to practice building our reliant self-care. I want you practicing that this week. Review your environment, your furniture placement, dangerous objects, and how you are keeping things safe. Find out if you have any sort of safety plan, like Cody was talking about. They have a button, they have things. Find out what those things you have right now in place, and then we'll see how those can either be implemented if they're working or not working, and what we can do with plans. And then write down any questions you might have over the week, so we can discuss at the beginning of the week. If something comes up and you're like, oh, I don't know what we should have done with this, or how could we have done this better, and you'll have some questions, I would love to discuss anything. So that is, we're at the end. I will open it up for some questions. Sorry, that was a lot of information. That's why we've broken it up, because it's just like dumping a lot of information. Hopefully you'll find some of it helpful. I'll leave it open for a couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording.